On this episode of the Hustle the Day podcast, I have Olga Kirshenbaum. Olga is known as the Money Whisperer. She is a money coach that helps people overcome their mental blocks with money. You're going to want to listen to this one. Let's get to it. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hustle the Day podcast. I am very excited to have Olga Kirshenbaum here with me today. Olga and I went back a little bit. I've been on her podcast before, and you know what? She's an awesome individual. I had to have her on my podcast. So, Olga, why don't you jump in here and tell me a little bit about yourself?
Thanks so much for having me on. Really excited. I am Olga Kirshenbaum. I am a money coach. My clients over the last 2 years have started calling me the Money Whisperer. Basically, I make complex money puzzles seem like they're a piece of cake to anyone who feels like money are not their deal. Money's not my language.
Very cool. Yeah. And, you know, honestly, it seems like it could be something so simple, you know, just dollars and cents. And to, you know, my 7-year-old, it is very simple. But as you grow up and get involved in, you know, so many different aspects of money, it can be very complicated. So it's nice to have somebody around like you that can help break down those things into more digestible bites. So I love that you've gotten the nickname the Money Whisperer, and you know you've run with that. I've noticed, you know, your profiles talk about it. What kind of background do you have that gives you the credit to be the Money Whisperer?
Sure. So I actually spent 10 years as an accountant in corporate America. A bit of that was at a CPA firm, but I'm a crazy person. I knew I wanted to be an accountant when I was graduating from high school. I had this misconception that there's a lot of math that goes on in there. Not true, but lucky for me, I went into the accounting degree and I realized I actually enjoy solving money puzzles. It's something that I was super excited about. Even when I was in high school, I was the go-to person for my friends, my family, to kind of say, hey, here's a money question. I'm not sure what to do with it. I've always been savvy. People would see me saving. I had a part-time job in high school, and I kind of became that person people came to with money questions. In high school, I was graduating and a friend said, hey, I have this part-time job that's full-time in the summer. I don't want to focus on picking up extra shifts. I want to be okay with money and focus on my studies. How do I kind of project that? How do I make sure I have holiday money, spending cash, and still paying everything I have to be responsible for? We went over some basic tips of like, how do you do that? How do you budget for all of that? 5 years later, she's like, hey, I have another question. I was like, sure, why not? She says, well, I actually saved the entirety of my student loans in these last 5 years. What do I do? Do I pay them off all in one go? Or do I just piecemeal it like everyone else? I said, are you crazy? Do you know how many of our friends would love to be like, hey, paid it off the day after I graduated?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of combined the two, like this passion for solving money puzzles and learning so much when I was working corporate. And now I love kind of making that bridge for people who maybe just want to get their personal finances in order. I also work with entrepreneurs and freelancers, self-employed individuals. The categories vary, but kind of helping people solve the money puzzles and figure out how money makes sense in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I noticed, you mentioned, you know, you work with entrepreneurs, and one thing I noticed on your website, you have a budget for freelancers. And, you know, it's so, to me, it's like budgets just don't make sense because, you know, 1 month is completely different from the next month to the next month. It's just all over the place. And so all these typical budget advice things that you see are based on, oh, you get this amount of money every 2 weeks. To me, that's pretty simple. But once you're all over the place in terms of income, that doesn't that doesn't compute the same way. And so that's really awesome that you have that guide for somebody like myself.
Absolutely. And that was inspired by someone I was talking to in the beginning, kind of talking about what I was starting, this business I was going into. He happened to be a musician and he said, hey, budgets always are hard because I go on tour. I won't get paid while I'm on tour. Things are kind of paid for. It's part of the tour budget.
Mm-hmm.
Then I will get paid, but it takes time to get paid. But when I get home, I have to pay for rent. I have to now pay for food. I have to have all these expenses coming out right away. And I was like, this is a massive problem. He may be a musician, but there's so many people who are part-time employees. Maybe their work is seasonal and it's not everyone has that same paycheck coming in every 2 weeks, 15 days, whatever it is. And that is really what kind of inspired that second template.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm glad that, that resource is there. But, people are coming to you to talk about money. Not everybody is comfortable with that. So what is it that made you kind of proactively start talking about money to other people?
I think it was kind of like the chicken and the egg situation here. I think the reason why these days I start money conversations is because I noticed how difficult it was to get people to talk about the money subject just in general. It wasn't like me pitching people. It was more like, if we're going to have a conversation about your services and how they can help me, I actually have to talk to you about my money fears. And that's really terrifying for people. So I love working with creatives. I tend to work mostly with creatives. So I found this pattern of people saying, I run away from it. I don't pay attention to it. I'll literally do anything to avoid it. But at the same time, they know they need that help. I think personally, this stems from a money talk stigma that most of us grow up with. It's not polite to talk about money. It's a taboo. Most people don't talk about it with their parents ever. And I believe not having those conversations is the reason why so many of us don't have the tools to actually go out there and be like, hey, I may be behind on this payment, but having the script, being able to have that conversation and say, hey, this is what I want. It's not easy when you've never talked about money. So that's really what drives me to start those money conversations. That's why I started my podcast, to kind of, one, show people it doesn't have to be so scary. I think the conversations we have, maybe they get a little uncomfortable. Some people share, not so fun money stories, but at the same time, it also shows people that they are not alone. So many people that I talk to will have this money shame on top of the money fears, and they'll say things like, everyone else has it going on but me. And I should know better because that's what everyone says. Like, of course you should have a budget. Yeah, but no one is taught how to do it. And then in turn, because they're not doing it, there's this shame of like, well, I should know better. It seems so easy, but I don't know it. And it's kind of like a vicious cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get back to your podcast here in a minute, but you talked a little bit about, you worked in corporate America. You had, this accounting background. At what point and how did you decide, I'm going to make this a full-time deal and make that jump?
Yes. So I would say I'm like an accidental entrepreneur. On one side, I did get my MBA in entrepreneurship. So I knew I was going to do it one day. I don't think it was going to be this soon in my plans. My last job, I was let go. And I did some soul searching. So I had this pattern. I loved being an accountant. It was so much fun. Not many people say that. I think it's riveting. It's thrilling. It's exciting. You solve money puzzles all day long. I think it's exciting. But And I would always work with a lot of creative people and they would fuel my passion for doing the numbers. And I would always find myself in these exciting companies, jobs on paper, great. And I wouldn't be fulfilled year and a half in. And then I'd start finding something else and run away from that and go to a new thing that was shiny and new. And I realized the last couple of jobs were in this pattern of like, I'm going to run away, go to this thing and not really pay attention to like what's really bothering me there. When I got fired, it was, let's say I got fired on a Monday. Wednesday, walking into that week, I had another interview planned already. So like my foot was already out the door. And I started thinking when I had all this time to finally sit down and be like, okay, there's clearly a pattern here. What's going on here? What am I going to do? And what is it that's missing? For me, what was missing was this people who tend to be managers, who tend to be directors. Yes, they care about their numbers, but they don't have the time, they don't have the bandwidth to really get to know what's going on there, no matter how beneficial it is for them. That's just the truth. There's also this gap of like, I have an accounting job. I actually don't have the capacity to also teach them. But I really enjoyed collaborating with people who were incredibly talented individuals and helping them see those bits and then seeing how they can have business impact. It's beautiful. So that's really what I really, really loved. But that was what was missing. And my friends and family came to the rescue and they started saying things, you do this. You're so great at this. It is natural for me. I love doing it. I could do it all day. I could have these conversations all day long. So then I was like, maybe this is something I should explore. In the beginning, I thought it would be a side hustle. I didn't think it'd be a full-time thing, but I also went on this soul searching journey where I'm confident the universe was like, you need to go this route. You're not getting a job in the near future. It's just like every time things would happen, it was not in the stars for me. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go for it. And here we are.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great story. I appreciate you sharing that with me. But I mean, it's definitely one of those things where I feel like there is usually, hindsight is 20/20, but you are put in those situations for a reason. And, obviously with you, it sounds like there was that reason that you were let go, that you were now able to pursue helping those creatives, but also satisfying that itch for solving the money puzzles. And then because it happens in entrepreneurship with everybody, what would you say was your biggest failure when you did go out on your own, and what's something that you learned from it?
I definitely didn't do enough planning, and then I did too much. So I didn't do enough planning in the sense where part of it was because I think I wasn't expecting it to be like a fully bootstrapped company in the beginning. My attention was 50-50. Like, I'm going to look for a job. Maybe it'll be part-time. And dividing that time really didn't help. I wish that I just committed to being a money coach and seeing that through and like really go full in. But at the same time, it was also thrilling, I have to say. I wouldn't recommend it for people. It was also the failure of planning too much, in the sense where I think a lot of entrepreneurs do this in the beginning, especially. We start to think of things that we can do that will take a bunch of time just so we don't have to go and start doing those sales, because sales aren't my forte. So for example, I spent 3 months planning my first, like, this is how I'm going to coach my clients. This is what it's going to look like. Even though I have like 10 years of experience doing this for my friends and family just post college, I was doing it before, like 15 years at least at this point. And I should have just gone with it. Instead, I spent 3 months planning something, all this time planning, had my first session, and I was like, well, 75% of that is getting scrapped.
Now the question is, are we talking about you or are we talking about me? Because I think that's me to a T.
Really?
I've been in that exact same situation where it's like, all right, plan. Let's just step away from the sales for a little while. We got to make sure this is hammered down, and then you get to the sales part and it's like, wow, that was a waste of time. I just needed to jump into it.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, I think we all get into it in the beginning, especially. I think part of it's kind of like a all encompassing learning experience where you have to go through those experiences to know that you shouldn't be doing it. But that's why I'm like, yeah, it's a failure, but it definitely set me up for better moving forward. Like now, if I have something new, I try not to plan it so much. Like obviously the logistics, how it gets executed, some things do need to be planned, but like don't spend 3 months planning something, especially if it's like me, I'm going to do this curriculum. And then after the first meeting, I was like, nope, it's not going to work like this at all. 3 months wasted though.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, I was in this exact situation just recently, before COVID-19 came along. I was planning to launch a course, and then by the time this all happened, it was like, okay, well that actually doesn't really apply now. That's kind of insensitive now. That just, I spent too much time planning to the point where it was, well, now I've got to start all over again. But again, that is a learning experience. It is what you take out of it, and now I've learned from that. But what would you say is a challenge that you never expected to happen when you went out on your own?
Yeah, I definitely didn't think I'd be doing as much marketing, advertising, content creation as I thought I would. I guess part of that is because times have changed, and these days, and I also did not think my business was going to be on online business. That's the other thing. Like my journey started on LinkedIn. I was like, I'm going to do this soul searching thing. I read a book called Career Hacking for Millennials by Max Altschiller. He talks about the power of LinkedIn. And I was like, light bulb moment. I think it doesn't matter what I want to do. Do I want to get a job? Do I want to do the side hustle? Do I want to be a full-time entrepreneur? There's so much power in LinkedIn because it's like this, we are pretty far in the country, but we're getting to know each other. And there's like this collaboration. We're getting to know each other, how we're working together. And that's why people will come to you, because they're like, I know who Trent is. I know who Olga is. And that's the person that I want to work with. And it doesn't matter. Do they want to hire you to do something? Do they want you to be like a consultant? So that's when I was like, I'm going to do that. But I didn't realize going into it, like, okay, content needs to be exciting. You can't just put out the same thing over and over again. You have to keep it exciting. You need to be on video. That was a challenge. Sometimes it still is a challenge. I have to say, I think with the pandemic and everything going on, sometimes it is harder to show up on camera. It's like, where am I going?
Yeah. No, being on camera is not something that was a skill set of mine either. That's something I've had to learn as well, and so I definitely can relate with you on that. But it's great that you're still going at it. I've talked to a couple other podcasts that I've been on where my message usually is one about consistency and persistence. And what that's really what this entrepreneurial journey is all about, is showing up even when you don't want to, and having your goal and never giving up until you achieve that goal. And I've seen that in you, and seen we connected through, I think it was Di Manuel, who was on your podcast, and he's just a genuine individual. And we've gone through the whole LinkedIn thing, and he's like, you know what, Olga just gets LinkedIn. You need to talk to her about it. But the more I got to know you, it was like that was just surface level. It's like, this is Olga's got so much to offer. We don't even need to talk about LinkedIn. So I like that, you brought that up. That's where that, marketing side just came in, and that's where you encountered that challenge of how much you had to work at that. And I understand. I feel like some days it's you don't have any creative juices left, and you've got to come up with something and to really make your product and your experience stand out. But I've got to applaud you for still going at it, even in the midst of a pandemic and everything that's going on in the world today. So just want to say a long-winded way of keep going. You've got a lot to offer, and I appreciate that we have connected over this time.
Oh, thank you so much. It's one of those things. I feel like every time you're like, man, it's getting harder and harder to show up. This is why I love LinkedIn and all the people that I connect on there with, because when you really need to hear it, like I actually really needed to hear that today. So thank you so much. Like sometimes it is hard to keep showing up, but I do have to say the way I dealt with that challenge also is thinking of ways where you can repurpose things, where you can, the podcast, like there are times that I may be posting just the podcast episodes every week. And, consistency is great, but I also think self-care is really, really huge. And if that means maybe you're not showing up every day for weeks and weeks, maybe it's 3 days a week. I think the most important part on LinkedIn, and that's why I feel like it's a little special for me, it's not just like the social media aspect. Yes, you can connect with all these people, but I feel like there's just such a natural way to create relationships on there that when, if you don't post for a couple of days, people will be like, hey, first off, are you okay? Which is also nice. But also if something does come up, an opportunity, people will still be thinking about you, especially when you get that momentum and you keep being consistent. People are like, I know that person comes back. I know they're for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like you mentioned, self-care is still important as well. But, even if you take that needed time, the fact that you come back and still work at it after that is part of that consistency. And so what happens to some people, myself included, is you take that break and that's something you never revisit. It's you lose sight of the goal or something like that. As long as you have that goal still in mind, that you come back to that when the time is ready, then that's what's important.
I think it's easy for me to come back after hiatus because my why is so, 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 so deep to me. I feel like my life's duty is to go out there and show people that if you just make friends with the money in your life, everything else in your life is going to be magical. It's not going to solve all your problems, but it sure makes things a heck of a lot easier when you're not worrying about living paycheck to paycheck. And I think there's these misconceptions that people think if you live on a budget, you're taking away, and it just doesn't have to be that way. And watching those transformations actually happen it's a beautiful thing. Watching people have better relationship with their spouses, with their children, their business is doing better, manifesting money that they never thought was possible for the next 3 months, just having some sort of reframing happen. And then it has ripple effects through everything. All of a sudden they're feeling better. All of a sudden they're excited to show up for those sales calls. And I feel like if I I have to show up for those people because they kind of need me and I need them, because it really just fuels me to watch these transformations, because then it's like, what else is possible? What else can we do that will take you to, even like, you got to the next level? What's that next level after that? It's almost addicting, I guess.
Yeah, and you know what? I could totally tell the tone and your mannerisms just changed completely when you talked about your why. So I can tell that is something that is deep rooted in you and something you are truly passionate about. That's what's going to drive you back to doing what you need to do to get your message out there to more people, to help them and also help you on your journey. That's really awesome to just see that physical change as you talk about that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you are offering to people is you've got your Shmoney Mastermind. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, so I offer it's called the Shmoney Academy. It is a money mastermind. It is an 8-week program where it's over Zoom calls. There's some things that I send to people every week where it's like topics that we'll be discussing over the next course of the session. One of the weeks it's one-on-one halfway through, because I believe it's super important for people to go through the process and get a money toolkit. But at the same time, in like we just talked about my why, and my why drives me so much. You need to kind of figure out what your why is. It doesn't have to be such big picture as I just described it, but knowing why you're doing this and what your goals are actually just helps you.
Yeah.
So the other part is having money conversations with people who a lot of the time they're strangers. Basically, you're talking about maybe money fears that you've had, but having these conversations with a group of people, it's a small group of people. It tends to be, right now I have one that's running that's only 2 people. Sometimes it goes up to 5. But having these different mindsets, these different money ideas, they also begin to learn from each other and not just from themselves.
Mhm.
It breaks down the money talk stigma. People sometimes have really emotional conversations that maybe they even aren't comfortable talking about with their spouses. Sometimes it's things they've avoided for decades, but it's really to kind of get you sorted with whatever your money goals are and get it to fit your budget, and make sure that when you are following a budget, you don't feel like you're taking away from yourself. You're not being hard on yourself. If you have a why, you can make it work. You just most people just kind of need a little bit of a tweaking on what they're doing. Half the stuff is already there, and it's a beautiful thing. It's an 8-week program. I'm going to be offering it to businesses starting July. Basically, any small business with up to 10 employees, I'm going to be working with them to facilitate Shmoney Academy for their employees, to kind of help their employees get their personal finances in order. I know that there are financial institutions who do this for their C-suite level executives. They'll say, if someone has their personal money in order, they will show up better, they will perform better, they will be happier. It's a no-brainer for them. So hopefully people will enjoy this for their employees as well.
That's very cool. Yeah, I didn't even think about the employees having their financial house in order allows them to be better workers, but I can speak from experience. When I'm have things more secure, I'm working better. That's I didn't even think of that, but like you said, reframing these things can open your mind to a world of possibilities, and in all aspects of money. So you're primarily a money coach. We talked a little bit about the Shmoney Academy, but what else do you do for individuals and businesses?
Sure. So I also do one-on-one coaching. I do it with individuals and business owners. I'd say there's similarities, but with business owners, it tends to be with self-employed individuals, freelancers, people who are really managing their businesses' money, and they have some money blocks that we carry everything from our personal life into our business. People who say business is a separate thing, personally, I think they're kidding themselves. There's no way that you can have money blocks, start a business, and not carry those money blocks into your business. For example, I found out through my journey, I am an aggressive saver. I do this in my personal life. I do it in my business. There's always tips that you can, once you know that thing, you can address it. But yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. So what would you say are some of the most common money mistakes that you see both personally and with business owners?
With business owners, I think this is, I don't think it's specific to creatives, but because I work with mostly creatives, I see this very often. They will avoid it. Like if you can imagine an ostrich with its head in the sand, that's what many of them tend to do. Unfortunately, though, avoiding it kind of snowballs out of control. I have seen businesses of 10 years, successful businesses, just not address the money situation. And it didn't become an issue until, there are taxes that haven't been filed. All of a sudden, you can't issue your 1099s for your contractors. And like anyone who's listening to this and is not a money person, I hear them shudder right now. It's not fun. I get it. But this impact of like the ripple effect, why I love doing this so much, because it can fix relationships and it can do so much good. It also can do just as much damage. Like I've seen businesses that are successful crumble, lose their clients because now this has become such a big thing for the partners to deal with, for anyone involved. Now all of a sudden people don't want to work with you because you're impacting their taxes, because you don't have your stuff in order. Then marriages fall apart because now you're like putting livelihood on the line for the whole family and you're not addressing it. And I'd say that is one of the biggest things I see. But it doesn't have to be so scary. So I would just say if you're feeling like it's kind of spinning out of control, it's never too late to actually go talk to someone and say, hey, where do I even start? Sometimes people will help you just diagnose a problem. They'll tell you, hey, this is what you got to do, and you can decide what's right for you. But that knowledge is everything. With people, I would say one of the biggest things, there's two big recurring things. One, people don't budget because they have these notions of you're going to live without, or it's just, it means being hard on yourself. And also using your bank account balance as the pulse on your money. Most often, people will have money on their credit cards that's spent. They're not going to be including that. And basically, it doesn't show you a true number of what's happening. So you kind of have a pulse, but it's not real. And half of the time, you have a lot less money than you think you do. I'd say those three are like the top ones that I see between businesses and individuals.
Yeah, I can see that. I've probably been in all those situations. There's been times where I've stuck my head in the sand, and there's times where I use the checking account as the pulse on how things are going. And so I'm glad that you're out there sharing that information and helping people get their mind right.
And
Uh,
also,
yeah.
no shame in that. I have been there. as an accountant, I hate doing my books because that's not my job now. Now I teach people how to confront these things. So I think it was also important for me to go through that myself. It's like, first 6 months that I was in business, I was like, I'm not going to have that many expenses. I will just, I'll remember them. Yeah, right. I will just catch up at the end of the year when I have to do my taxes. I maybe did 3 months of the 6 that I was in business first year. And then I had to do my taxes. And then I spent 6 hours doing catch up work. And I was like, I hate this. I hate this so much. What are you doing? You're an accountant. You should know better. I was like, you know what? You're also skilled at like streamlining this. Now it's a no brainer. I have like a system in place. I don't even have to think about it. But we all have been there. Also bootstrapping in business. I've been there. I've checked my money like, I'm just going to look at the balance because there's bigger things going on. I'm not sure I'm ready to face them. Denial is a big thing sometimes.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. So jumping back to your podcast, you're kind of helping break down the stigma of the money conversations with your 9 minutes of creative wisdom, and you talk to a number of impressive individuals, myself not included. But so for my audience that does have a podcast, how is it that you find some of these incredible guests that you've had?
I think some of them I got lucky. So I remember getting an invitation to connect from a former NFL player, and I was like, am I getting catfished? I actually I did a lot of research on his account. I was like, this can't be real. Why would a former NFL player want to connect with me? But he's a financial planner and he was connecting with people in our field. And that's how I ended up having Jedediah Collins on my show. Steve Sims, I joined his newsletter. I kind of would respond once in a while and say like, hey, really enjoyed this. Most of the time it was his team. And then one time he responded and I was like, sweet, now I have Steve's email. And I sometimes go and do crazy things. I can't tell you the number of people that I've reached out to that just never gone back to me. But I'm like, hey, listen, sometimes these people will respond and they will get back to you. And all of a sudden you're talking to Steve Sims on your show. I would say don't let it, they're just people. And sometimes it's just a little bit of luck. Maybe they'll read it, maybe they won't. I have another former NFL player coming on. Sometimes you just have to go out there and be like, hey, I think you'd be great. I tell people why they think they would be great for the show. Sometimes it's because I personally admire them. Sometimes I think they have a story that could really inspire the audience. And I think what's really been helping lately is to also send, it's so easy to say like, hey, come be on my podcast, 9 minutes of creative wisdom. And the person now has homework to do. They have to look it up and what episode am I going to look for? I tried to find an episode that would be interesting to them. So for example, if I'm going to be talking to someone like Di, I would pick someone in the same field, someone who has a similar energy level. And that way he'll be like, oh, someone like me was on the show. I vibe with this. And then they'll be more likely to come on your show. If someone's like, owns a video production company or a videographer, those people in like the video section, it's like, hey, all these people could be, they're kind of like, I don't want to say bait. But it's a good in because they can relate to them. I think if I sent the NFL player episodes to some of the women, they'd be like, who cares? So I try to kind of cater my invitations. I also try to use my current, like I'm still, I would say small fish. And I don't automate as many things as I know I will in the future as I grow. So I try to kind of use this as an opportunity to kind of foster those relationships. So I know I can reach out to them, and instead of sending them this like generic thing that I'm going to copy and paste to people, I try to make it personal, because honestly, I think everyone is also a little tired of the generic, non-personal. They want to feel special. So I try to kind of mix it up, kind of like, maybe I'll get lucky, but also I try to put a little strategy to it, so that when I am saying, hey, I think you'd be great for the show, I'm also sending them something from the show that gives them a good idea, and hopefully it'll resonate with them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's some fantastic advice. Something that I'll be going back through and writing notes on to get guests on this podcast in the future. So
Yeah.
I I appreciate that. Um, so I don't want to take too much of your time, but I've got just two questions that I wanted to ask you. What Since it is the Hustle of the Day podcast, what is your personal definition of the word hustle?
I think it would probably be the opposite of what most people think hustle is. I think most people think it's like run, 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 grind, grind, grind. For me, hustle is actually about balance. I don't think that I could hustle without like my me time, without my self-care time. I spend about 2 hours every morning meditating, doing yoga, reading because I don't make enough time for it, and journaling. It's like a must for me. Without those things, hustling before, like coming in, grinding every day, not always seeing progress, was really difficult. But now that I have these things and I can kind of check those boxes off, like, hey, maybe today kind of sucked, but I got those four things out of the way and they were good for me. That allows me to continue hustling every week. So I think for me, hustle is all about balance.
Awesome. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and that's definitely been a consistent theme. Is hustle used to mean something different 5 years ago.
Yep.
Now it is a completely different thing, and each person has their own definition on it, and that's why I asked that question, because no two answers have been exactly the same. So I appreciate your perspective on that, and I definitely agree with it. So the last question I want to ask you, though, is personal or business. What is it that excites Olga about the future?
I think all of the possibilities. I think it's a weird thing to say, I think, considering the times, everything that's going on. But I do believe that, especially painful moments in our life, are transition periods, and there obviously there could be things ending and things changing. Change is not fun, but it also allows room for new opportunities and growth. And that's what I'm excited about. I think there's going to be a lot of changes in society. There's going to be changes in kind of everything. I think life as we know it is changing in the next couple of years, not in the drastic sense like, doomsday or Terminator days are coming, but I
Right.
think things are going to be changing on a large scale. And I'm excited to see what kind of opportunities that means for people like us, for entrepreneurs. I think things have changed so much and things have sped up considering the pandemic, that I'm very excited to see what kind of things people come up with, what people create. And I think it's going to be exciting to watch.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's going to be a lot changing and a lot of exciting things coming out of it, and so that's awesome. Where's the best place for people to get in contact with you and find you if they want more information from you?
Absolutely. The best place to contact me is on LinkedIn, Olga Kirshenbaum, or my blog, which is rags to riches consulting.com.
Perfect. And I'll put links to those in the show description below. But Olga, I want to say thank you. I appreciate you taking time out of your day, and to talk to me and keep this relationship going so we can help each other out here in the future.
Awesome. Thanks so much again for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
No problem. Well, I know I've gotten value out of this, so I know my audience has gotten value out of this. So I encourage you to get out there and hustle the day. Thanks for listening to the Hustle the Day podcast all the way through. I really appreciate that. I just want to let you know that I help small businesses with their online strategy. So if you or anyone that you know needs help with their online strategy and owns a small business, I'm your guy. Go ahead and connect with me at Trent V Bray on Instagram or TrentVBray.com.